The verb mettre is an irregular verb, so there's no rule to follow to conjugate it. You just have to memorize it. But once you know how to conjugate this verb, you'll actually be able to conjugate a few other verbs as well. Bonjour, bonjour. I'm Kashi, and this is Let Us Learn French, where we make French a little bit easier and a lot less confusing. Today, we'll learn how to conjugate the verb mettre, to put, in le présent de l'indicatif, le passé composé, and le futur simple. In other words, we'll learn to conjugate the verb mettre in all three of the basic and very important tenses in French. But before we get started, make sure to download your free guide to verbs and verb tenses in the description below. In this guide, you will learn about the most common regular and irregular verbs, the most important verb tenses, and when to learn each verb tense. So at which point in your French learning journey, you need to learn each one of those verb tenses. So again, make sure to grab that. It's in the description below and in the first comment. Let's get started. As I said at the beginning of the video, the verb mettre, to put, is an irregular verb, which means that there's no rule that we can follow to make it easier for us to learn how to conjugate this verb. But since it's a very common verb, you will probably be using it quite a lot, and then you will get the hang of it pretty quickly. So let's get started. Le présent de l'indicatif for the verb mettre is je mets, tu mets, il, elle, on met, nous mettons, vous mettez, il, elle mettent. So both je and tu mets and il, elle, on met are pronounced the same way, mais. But for je and tu, there's an S at the end, whereas for il, elle, on, it's just M-E-T. So again, it's je mets, tu mets, il, elle, on met, nous mettons, vous mettez, il, elle mettent. For le passé composé, the verb mettre uses l'auxiliaire or the auxiliary verb avoir. And if you don't know what an auxiliary verb is, make sure to watch that video in the top right corner where I explain in detail what an auxiliary verb is and why it's important, etc., etc. So for le passé composé, you add the auxiliary verb and le participe passé. So le participe passé, or past participle, in this case is mis, M-I-S, it's pronounced as me. And the full conjugation is j'ai mis, tu as mis, il, elle, on a mis, nous avons mis, vous avez mis, ils, elles ont mis. Again, if you don't know what a past participle is, or if you want to learn a little bit more about how to conjugate a verb in le passé composé in general, how to conjugate any verb in le passé composé in French, make sure to watch that video in the top right corner. For le futur simple, in this case, we just remove the E at the end, and we add the endings AI, ES, E, ONS, EZ, and ONT. Je mettrai, tu mettras, il, elle, on mettra, nous mettrons, vous mettrez, ils, elles mettront. So again, je mettrai, tu mettras, il mettra, nous mettrons, vous mettrez, ils mettront. Now that you know how to conjugate the verb mettre in those three tenses, you can actually conjugate a few more verbs in a very similar way. Verbs ending in mettre, for example, admettre, permettre, transmettre, promettre, and remettre, are conjugated in the exact same way as the verb mettre. For example, le présent de l'indicatif of the verb permettre, to allow or to permit, is je permets, tu permets, il, elle, on permet, nous permettons, vous permettez, ils, elles permettent. Remember that for the verb mettre, it was only the underlined part. Je mets, tu mets, il met, etc. Let's look at a different example using le passé composé. And this time we use the verb promettre, to promise, and it's j'ai promis, tu as promis, il, elle, on a promis, nous avons promis, vous avez promis, ils, elles ont promis. So again, we have l'auxiliaire avoir, j'ai, tu as, il, elle, on a, nous avons, vous avez, ils, elles ont. And then for mettre, we only had me, MES, but here, since the verb is mettre, we use promis. So whatever was in front of mettre, we still keep that, and then we conjugate it exactly the same way like we would conjugate the verb mettre. In a similar way, le futur simple of the word admettre, to admit, is j'admettrai, tu admettras, il, elle, on admettra, nous admettrons, vous admettrez, ils, elles admettront. And here you might notice that in this case we use the J apostrophe instead of J-E, je. That's simply because admettre starts with a vowel versus mettre started with a consonant. So whenever we're conjugating a verb starting with a vowel, je becomes J apostrophe or J apostrophe. That's everything for today. If you like this video and got value out of it, please give it a big thumbs up and comment down below which verb you would like to see next. So which verb you would like to conjugate next. And also, if you like to see verbs conjugated in a different tense, let me know. Before you go, make sure to grab your free guide on verbs and verb tenses again, and share this video with your family and friends who also like to learn French. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next Sunday. Take care.